I just wanted to welcome everyone on behalf of the Housing First Europe Hub to the latest in our series of webinars around practice in our sort of growing community of practice, where we use this opportunity to bring our partners, our associates, others working on Housing First at various levels, from frontline workers to managers in housing services, in local authorities, ministries, to come together and really use this opportunity to learn from each other, to share some difficulties, some challenges, and to think about how maybe some other solutions or ideas can inspire you in your own work in your own communities, and how you're working in Housing First and how you're trying to scale it up. I'm coming to you from Brussels in my daughter's bedroom, as you can see from the decor. So we often ask that the participants, if you could just let us know in the chat where you're from, where you're tuning in from, maybe what you're doing in terms of Housing First, just so we have an idea who's out there. The panelists, we can see each other, but we can't see you as participants in the webinar. So that's just how it is. Otherwise it might be a bit too many little boxes on the screen. But we really have designed this in a way that we hope to have a very engaging discussion with you following the presentation. So feel free to use the chat during the presentations, and we'll gather the questions, and with Niall we'll take some time to use the question and answer period after the presentations to have a conversation and a discussion. So again, handing over now to Niall, and welcome everybody.
Thank you, Samara. Thank you very much for your kind words. Welcome everybody. This is our third installment of the webinar series from the Best Practice European Hub. We are today looking at how we work in a Housing First setting, and we deal with grief and loss, and how we cope with stress. And I'm delighted to have Emma and Laura with us, who are both going to give a presentation. Emma is going to do her presentation on grief and loss, and then after that we're going to have Laura, who's going to be looking at stress while working in Housing First. As Samara said, we are going to use the chat function for any questions, and we will have times for questions after both presentations. So if you do have any questions that come up during the presentation, please put them in there, and we'll see that we have a good discussion after, and that everybody gets their questions answered. So I am going to introduce Emma Wilkinson first. She's doing the grief and loss presentation. Emma is an art therapist and a health and well-being team leader at Rock Trust. And as we know, Rock Trust is located in Edinburgh, Scotland, and they are working to end youth homelessness. Emma works on the health and well-being program, and they support young people who have mental health issues and suffer from poor mental health to exit homelessness. Emma has worked internationally supporting people in bereavement therapy in a hospice setting. She's also used trauma-informed, attachment-based therapy for adolescents in residential care, and therapy supports for students in educational settings. Second up, we will have Laura Young. Laura is a team leader in Focus Ireland. She's located in Kilkenny and Tipperary with the Housing First service. She's 8 years experience working alongside single adults and families who have experienced homelessness. She has a BA from University of Cork and has a passion to work in Housing First. She wants to continue to learn new ways of supporting and leading a team of service users and staff in the Housing First setting. So without further ado, I am going to ask Emma to share her screen and deliver the first presentation. So thank you, Emma.
Thank you so much for that introduction. So as Niall was saying, my name is Emma Wilkinson. Can you guys see that? Is that coming up?
Yes, we can. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm going to be talking to you today about grief and loss. And this is a space for us to think about how grief affects us and how we work with it. And this can be a difficult subject. So I'm just going to invite you to take care of yourself and be mindful that talking about death can bring up some very big emotions. And so just to check in with yourself during this presentation, and it's okay to take a break from this as well. I think that this will be recorded, so you can always come back to it as well. So we'll start off with taking a little check-in together, kind of inviting you into that space. So just noticing your feet on the floor, maybe the chair holding you, checking in and seeing how your breath feels today. You can have your eyes open or closed during this. Just noticing the quality of your breath today. We're not going to change it. We're just going to see how you're feeling in your body. And then bringing into mind a symbol of safety. It could be a place or a person, maybe an emotion, an image, a color, a smell, something that connects you to this idea of safety. And I'll use this as your anchor today. It's something that you can come back to when we're talking about these difficult conversations. And then I'll invite you again to kind of check into that breath. Just noticing that quality. And then bringing you back to feeling those places of contact and support in your seat. Maybe bringing a little wiggle into your toes and your fingers. And we'll bring you back into the room. We'll kind of get started on this journey together. So we're going to start with just looking at what a definition of grief is. And grief is an intense sorrow caused by loss. And some people might experience like a numbness, maybe feeling kind of like removed from everyday life when they're grieving, almost like life is kind of carrying on around you, but without you a bit. And a lot of people have difficulties carrying out like daily tasks, things that they used to do. So in the work that we're working with, you might have thoughts right now coming up of like a loss being like a loss of a home, a loss of a safe space, that basic human right to safety, privacy, maybe loss of comfort, belonging, of family. We're going to kind of dive into these different gateways of grief. So these different areas that can bring us into grief and loss. So Francis Weller wrote about these 5 different gateways. The first one is everything we love, we will lose. And that's probably what's most familiar to us when we think about grief and loss. So it's, of course, the people that we love, but also like our capabilities. So maybe it's the loss of a job, a loss of someone gets sick, like loss of what they're used to their body being able to do. This can also be like a loss of objects as well. So this is the first gateway, is kind of the losses that we're used to talking about maybe. And then the second gateway, the places that have not known love. This might be something that really connects to the people that you've been working with. This is kind of the neglected pieces of our soul, what we perceive as defective parts of ourselves. So Francis talks about how we cannot grieve for something that's outside the circle of what we think is our worth. It's kind of like we get stuck in these losses a bit more. And this can be like shame, the shadow side of us. So what we might be talking about here is childhood trauma that is pushed to the side, maybe some childhood sexual abuse, parts of ourselves that we don't want to look at. And then the third gateway is the sorrows of the world. And this is something we can probably really relate to right now in this time of the pandemic, kind of the global losses. This also might relate to like global warming as well. So we're all kind of connected in this cycle of like loss and pain, happiness and suffering, life and death. And even if we try and turn off the news and kind of shut out everything that's going on, we're still entwined in it and it can affect us. The fourth loss, this is another one that I think might bring up some feelings around the people that we know and the people that we work with and maybe ourselves as well, and what we expected and did not receive. So this is like the neglected, unrealized expectations, unaccomplished dreams, hopes, opportunities that are just out of reach, that feeling of what might have been. So this is the parts that have not had love that maybe should have. So that neglected part. So maybe in childhood, not having a safe place, not having a place to play, not having that loving, caring, holding. And then this fifth part is ancestral grief. So there's this saying, what is not transformed is transmitted. So things that have been passed down through generations that maybe haven't been explored and processed. So it could be abuse, impoverishment, war, genocide, expulsion from someone's home as well. So these are all these parts of grief and loss, and they all kind of tie together as well. So if you have a loss in one area, it might bring up other losses and feelings from other parts. And especially if those losses have not been processed. So we're going to look at one way of processing loss as well. Sorry, before we do that, this is a poem that we won't get into today, but I really love it. It's by Pesha Gertley, and I think it ties into that second loss a lot as well, of the loss of the neglected pieces. But we're going to look at routines and rituals. And as an art therapist, this is something that we're very involved with. And Ellen Dissanayake created this term, like to make special, in her examination of art, along with play and ritual as a human behavior. And she proposed that making special is a basic human need in evolution. So just the same as like making fire or tools, this is something that is needed, these rituals to make special. So if you look back at any kind of ancient civilization, you always see these elements of these rituals, right? So like in Egypt, the hieroglyphics, there are big rituals around the passage into the afterlife. That's like a great example of this making special. So it's anything that marks like a passage, maybe into adult life, into marriage, into death, into birth. And it's always a space and time for recognizing, responding, and absorbing change. So that's that part of how we process grief and loss or change. We have to kind of recognize, respond, and absorb. So just some of the benefits of rituals are a sense of control in an otherwise uncontrollable situation. It kind of lies on this threshold between the conscious and the subconscious, a physical and emotional like release. It's a social event, a time for us to support each other. And really importantly, it's a time for us to make meaning out of what has happened. And these acts are very like sacred. It almost feels like stepping into like a sacred space, you know, when you're part of them. And they can be these large acts like we think of as a funeral, but they can also be these really small acts. And sometimes these small ones are really important, like at Christmas, taking out a recipe from your grandmother and making those cookies, and everyone sits around and they take that bite and they have that taste and they just spent a moment remembering them. And those are really important to kind of acknowledge. Every year we're still missing these people. We're missing these parts of our life. It's with grief, it's not that you kind of get over it, you just integrate it into your life into a different way. So it's really important to give that time. And something that's important to keep in mind is that children sometimes can be kind of excluded from these rituals because we're not sure that they're ready for it, or it might be difficult for them. And it's important, maybe it's not quite going to the funeral, but giving them some type of way to be involved and to process can be really helpful. And if they don't get that, then other losses can bring up those past losses again. We're not going to go into all of these today, but these are different models of grief and loss. And grief is really like a unique experience. And so it's very good to have a lot of different ways to process it. And even for the same person, it can be like a unique experience, the different losses. So I think I sent you guys out some readings about all these different models, and you can look at them in your own time to kind of think about what model fits with what loss for you and kind of making those connections. But today we're just going to go into this model of the whirlpool of grief. And You might kind of guess why we're going into it today. As an art therapist, it's a very visual model, so I really enjoy it a lot. And it tells like a story as well. So the Whirlpool of Grief was created by Richard Wilson. And the story that goes along with it is that we're on this river of life. And the waters might be really nice, might be a bit choppy, but then we have this loss and we kind of hit this waterfall. And you might go into shock or numbness. It might feel like that drop on a roller coaster a bit when you kind of lose your stomach for a moment. And then we hit this whirlpool of grief. We're in a place of confusion, of disorientation, feeling a bit out of control, not able to breathe, not knowing which way is up or which way is down. And then you might move out of the river and get kind of washed up into the rocks, and you might feel a bit broken, depressed, maybe not connected to that river, that life energy. You might not be able to find your boat anymore. You may have lost your life jacket. And eventually you're pulled back into the river, into mourning. It might not be the same river that you were on before. It might be quite different and look quite different. As you can see, the river's in a different place now. And as we go along this river, we might hit rocks, like some anniversaries or holidays, something that reminds us of the person, something that will throw you off balance again. And sometimes you can see those from a far distance and you can kind of prepare for them and navigate around them. And other times they just come up unexpectedly. So I attended a training around grief and loss with this model, thinking of COVID. And I really liked that she said, you know, looking at this model and looking at COVID, we might be all in the same storm, but and we may even be on the same river, but we're definitely all in different boats, right? So we have different supports and different resources. So I'm just going to invite you today. I won't ask you to do any art, but just like to take a moment and start visualizing your own boat and like, what are your supports? What are your resources? The things that you find helpful or make you happy. Kind of looking at what makes your boat strong and what makes it kind of vulnerable. Does your boat have like a coverage, maybe a canopy? Do you have a map in your boat in case you get lost? Do you have a sail? Maybe you even have a crew to help guide you. Maybe you're not alone on this boat. So just kind of thinking of those and those resources. And I think that's kind of a good place for us to kind of wrap up and move to Laura, who's going to talk a little bit more about coping strategies and stress as well, and tie into those pieces.
Thanks, Emma. That was a very, very good grounding and good oversight in terms of what grief is, and I suppose the difference between grief and bereavement, and how we deal with loss in our lives. So thank you very much, Emma. Laura, I'm going to ask you to come in now, please. And if you could share your screen and do your presentation, that'll be great. Thank you very much.
Morning, everybody. Thank you, Emma, as well. Just before I start, that was really, really informative. I've taken some notes as well, and definitely wouldn't mind looking into what my boat looks like. So thank you for that. So today, I suppose my name is Laura. I am calling in from Ireland, and I hope everybody's well and it's sunny where you are. It's sunny where we are here. I am going to discuss today how we cope with stress while delivering Housing First. And my kind of main role here today is to kind of hopefully give you some examples of what our organisation, both formally and informally, do to support our teams and ourselves with stress. So I'm just going to give you a brief intro on who I am and what I do on the Housing First team. I'm then going to go into just a brief intro on the Housing First team in the southeast of Ireland, as we are coming from a rural background. I'm going to go through the job itself, the importance of wellbeing and self-care, some examples of the stresses that we have, or the stressors that we have and that we come up against on a day-to-day basis within Housing First. Our organisation, like I had mentioned, there's supports for coping with stress that we have access to. And I've also put in our outcomes when we use these organisation supports, what those outcomes look like. And Emma will be delighted to know I've also put together a gallery. This is, I suppose, I've compiled some of the activities we've used in a picture format. So hopefully you might get some ideas from potentially some of your own teams. So who am I? So I'm Laura. I'm the team leader for the Housing First team in the southeast of Ireland. There are 2 team leaders on our team, and Michelle Monaghan is one of the other team leaders, and she's helped me with this presentation, along with my project manager, Lisa O'Brien, who leads all the teams that are in the southeast of Ireland for Housing First. So I suppose a little bit about my background. As Niall had mentioned, I have a BA in early childhood studies. So a long time ago, I was working as a teacher in the Middle East. I was also working with disadvantaged communities in South America and in Australia. And that led me to work my way into Focus Ireland, the not-for-profit organisation here that works with homeless individuals. And since then, I've been here over 8 years now, and I've worked with families, children and single adults now on the Housing First team. So a little bit about Housing First in the southeast of Ireland. Here we have our lovely Irish flag, or Irish map, and many of you may have visited our capital, Dublin, in the past. Just here where our lovely leprechaun is, this is the southeast of Ireland. We also call it the sunny southeast because kind of next stop off the coast is France. It's not very sunny all the time, but we like to think it is. So within that Housing First southeast of Ireland, we would have 5 regions. As I mentioned, I support 2 of those 5 regions. That's in Tipperary and Kilkenny. And Michelle, the other team leader, would support our customers and team in Carlow and Wexford, and we have kind of a joint team effort in the whole of the southeast. So we would work with individuals on the Housing First team in each county. We would have 1 project worker, so 1 team member, and they would support 12 service users. So it is quite a high caseload, as our service users would have quite high needs. We do also work on an intensive care and case management model. So this basically means that our team would do intensive care and case management with the individuals that we work with or our service users, and we would pull on the services that are out in the community for further supports. So we don't have what's called a multidisciplinary team. We're not able to turn to our right and ask maybe a psychologist or a doctor for help. We might not be able to turn to our left and ask for a mental health professional or a substance misuse professional for our help. We always have to pick up the phone and ask somebody in the community for this help. So at the moment, our role is very much educating the community in Housing First and trying to get them really on board with the Housing First service. So this can have its challenges, as you can imagine. So I suppose just the job itself. The job is hard. Our work is hard. Working in Housing First is very hard, and I'm not going to pretend it isn't. And I suppose when we're leaving for the day, it's very, very important that as a team leader, my role is to make sure that, you know, my team, they don't put closure on their work, but it can put closure on them if they don't look after themselves. And this is a quote I kind of came across at the International Housing First Partners Conference a few weeks ago, and I really liked it. You don't put closure on your work, but it can put closure on you if you don't put in the supports around you to protect you. So for example, one of the things is, it's very easy to do. We know that we work with individuals that have very complex needs, and sometimes it's hard not to bring that home. And especially in this current climate, COVID-19, we're currently at home. We might be just on the phone with a child protection concern or dealing with a major incident, and then we get up and we walk into our lovely kitchen or our sitting room. It's very hard to kind of just break that. So I suppose today it's just about making sure that we are minding ourselves and we are kind of coping with, dealing with how do we manage ourselves and cope in the best way possible for dealing with these situations. So one of my colleagues actually, she is actually still in an office-based setting, thankfully over COVID, and we were talking about, you know, how do you stop for the day? And she gave me a very good example that when she leaves the office, she's just not able to just close the door and leave and park everything at the office, but she has come to this kind of routine where she drives in the car. She's about a 40-minute drive to get home, and on the way she sees a McDonald's sign. And when she sees that sign, she says, that's it now, I'm parking everything for the day. That's happened, and I'm going to, when I've passed that McDonald's sign, I'll maybe go in and have a McFlurry, but I'll pass it and I will think of, okay, what's next? I'm going to think of maybe what's for dinner, who am I going to call in my family network, and just think of maybe the physical activity I'm going to do throughout the day, throughout the evening, and completely forget and just kind of leave work at that McDonald's sign. And then the next day when she comes back, she picks it up at the McDonald's sign and she heads back into work. And I asked her what happens if you're on holiday when you see that McDonald's sign. And she said, it's funny, it doesn't actually come into me. It's just my routine on my 5-day-week routine. So it's just a way that she's able to kind of park what's going on for her and trying not to bring stuff home for her. So the importance of well-being and self-care, it's just so important. There's no doubt about it. There's evidence there that shows we really need to be looking after ourselves as well as we do with our own service users. So we deal with individuals in Housing First who are constantly in stress mode. And if we're not careful, this can be put on us and on our teams. And we need to make sure that our teams are being supported at all times. So like I was mentioning there, it's important that our team need to be at work when they're at work and at home when they're at home as best possible. So some of the examples I've put together of the stressors that we would see on the Housing First team in the rural community in the southeast of Ireland. So we deal with antisocial behaviour on a regular basis, and this can lead to quite high stress levels amongst the team if we're not dealing with it ourselves. Sometimes paperwork. So for example, there's a load of reports needed to be done, there's data returns needed to be done, and that can just lead to a stress. We are working with service users that have sometimes unhappy neighbours, and it could just be a neighbour ringing to say the grass is too long next door, or there might have been a bit of noise at the weekend. And this can lead to constant stress if it's constantly happening. When we have customers or service users that are not attending meetings, or maybe we are dealing with professionals that don't attend meetings for some reason or another, this can be quite stressful because we're trying to get supports in place for people that they've requested, and unfortunately somebody's not showing up to a meeting. It can be quite frustrating and can lead to being quite stressful. I put in training day here today because my colleague actually, and it happens to me as well, we are such a small team. You know, we have one project worker, they work with 12 individuals, and I support that one project worker in one county and another in a different county. And when they go on training days, even if it's just a half a morning or a full day, although we might put our out of office on and redirect calls to my mobile, they still say it can be quite stressful still leaving for that one day, because with Housing First, there's constant contact between you and the service user, and them not having that during training, it's hard to get into the zone of training, they say. So it's just about dealing with that, managing that, and trying to be aware of that even. When we have service users who become unwell, this can be very stressful. They may be admitted into hospital. We may not know what's going on. And this could be very stressful example for what's happening within our Housing First team. We would also have some of our service users who may be given written warnings by their landlord, or maybe asked to leave, which is given a notice to quit. And by doing so, we could be quite stressed. We may not have a property for them ready to go. We may not have a bed and breakfast available for them, or a hostel-like environment, and it may lead to rough sleeping. So that in itself is quite a stress, not just for our service users, but for our teams. Like I mentioned, no properties. We're dealing with high risk assessments, not having a multidisciplinary clinical team to hand. So with Housing First, some of the teams that we're aware of in Ireland, but not unfortunately in the Southeast, have team members that are specific to Housing First. So there's a nurse on their team that's specific to Housing First. There's a psychologist on their team that's specific to Housing First. And unfortunately, we don't have that service at the moment. We don't have that resource. And that can lead to high stresses because we're wondering, what do we do? We're waiting for someone to call us back, and it's just not at hand. COVID-19 has been the last year a huge stress for our team members. I suppose a lot of the services, especially the mental health services, the substance misuse clinics, have been closed or maybe are at a very limited capacity. And this in itself has led to huge stresses where we've had frustrations around service users not accessing the appropriate services they need on an immediate basis. So COVID hasn't been helpful for many reasons, and that just being one example. And then unfortunately, we have been dealing with death and grief on our team amongst our service users. And thankfully not many, but it does happen. And we just need to make sure that we are minding our team and ourselves around when this happens. And I think Emma's presentation has really given us some guidance on how to deal with that going forward as well. So thank you, Emma. I was reading the Irish Times just at the weekend, and I was reading an extract from Dr. Deirdre O'Shea from the University of Limerick. And she just mentioned Burnout is a process. We don't wake up one morning and go, I'm burnt out. It is a process. And it actually reminded me back when I was working in a homeless residential area in Dublin. And I used to cycle to work some days, which took me an hour. And I used to drive to work other days, which took me about 20 minutes. And I remember I got to a stage where I was leaving for work and I went, how did I get here? Did I walk? Did I run? Did I get the bus? Did I drive? Did I cycle? I actually couldn't remember. Did I need to go and get my keys, or did I need to go and get my bike helmet? And that kind of reminded me that, oh, Laura, I think you might be a little bit on the stress side. I forgot how I got to work. I didn't remember the journey at all. And it took me quite a while to remember, okay, I was actually delighted to know that I had my bike with me, because I obviously needed that bit of exercise as well. So with Focus Ireland, as I mentioned, it's a not-for-profit organisation, and it has put in some fantastic formal and informal coping strategies for our team members. So I'm going to go through those shortly, but before I do, I just wanted to mention that we have 9 values in Focus Ireland that we would kind of relate back to when we're dealing with stress. And the three most, the first 3 here, respect, safety and quality, are something that we would always kind of revert back to as well when we're seeing maybe a team member who is potentially maybe not giving us the quality of work that we're usually seeing. It would kind of be a red flag to say, okay, what's going on? Let's go back to this value of quality. You know, what's happening here in this practice and what's going on for you? And knowing our team members is key. So values inform our actions and practice and our reference points to check in that our attitudes and behaviors on our team are aligned with the ethos of the organization. So it's just something to keep in mind when we are looking at, you know, we might be seeing a team member who is dealing with a stressful situation that might just not just be in work, it may also be at home. And we just have to just make sure that we're keeping in line with our organizational values as well. So some of the formal practices that we have in place, I've put together, as you know, we have the 8, I suppose, principles of Housing First. And I just kind of created this 8 ball myself. I've identified these main 8 formal practices that we use in Focus Ireland. So we would have supervision, the one-to-one practice amongst the supervisor and the supervisee. We have group supervision, and that is a peer support group. It's a small group internally whereby the group come together and discuss some of the occurring themes that are going on for them or the challenges that are going on for them, and they're getting that peer support group. We have what's called reflective practice. This is maybe a larger group, again, trying to identify themes within the practice of Housing First. It is run by an external psychotherapist, and we are trying to make sure that we are looking at PI, or what we would call the psychologically informed environment. So making sure that we're always referencing back to, you know, our customers who may be dealing with trauma-informed care, trauma from their past, and that space of reflective practice is a great way of kind of getting an insight from a psychotherapist point of view as well. We would do debriefing on a daily and a regular basis, and it's something we do regularly when there's incident after incident and where necessary. At our team meetings, we also have on the agenda well-being. It's a check-in. We would have team meetings every second week, and this is just, you know, it would have a usual agenda, but check-in around how's everybody doing is a huge piece at our team meetings. Focus Ireland also have the appraisal forums, whereby when somebody is new to the organisation, they would have a check-in as a 3-month, on a 6-month, and on a yearly basis thereafter around what's going on for them, and if there's any challenges that they can discuss those, possibly before the appraisals even there, but something to mark with where we can create goals for the future for our team members. Recently enough, there's been a new system called the Buddy system that's been introduced. I think this is a fantastic system because basically we have, for example, one team member who's new to a team and has never been in the organization before. They would buddy up with somebody who's been in the organization for quite a while and just have that an extra go-to person. Then we have the EAP, which is the Employment System Program Scheme, which is again an external scheme available to our team members, including myself, whereby we can just ring up if we're dealing with any challenges that we find we need somebody maybe from the outside looking in at what's going on for us. So they're just kind of the formal practices we use. I hope you like our 8 ball. We also have the employee engagement team. And this is something that we've been really kind of bursting for, especially during COVID. So the engagement team is an advocate who promotes engagement, provides ongoing support to leaders, managers, and team members. And they are really keen to keep wellness on the agenda. So what they do is they send us emails about maybe examples of ways to support wellness within our team. They give us some fun challenges to do, and I'll go through those shortly. What it is, it's this engagement team to make sure that the whole community of Focus Ireland, not just Housing First, is coming together to get engaged with each other and the other services. So some of the informal practices, bear with me. We like to have, I suppose, some outdoor activities such as these squirrels, but it's really important, I suppose, as I mentioned, knowing our team members, constant team check-in. So every Monday morning I would have a team check-in at 10 o'clock, check-in, how's the weekend, how's everybody going, and a bit of a motivational for the week ahead. My availability as a team leader is very, very key. And if I'm not available, to make sure to let the team know that I'm not available, so that they can find someone, maybe the other team leader or the project leader, just to communicate whatever's going on for them. We have wellness months, and at the moment it's mindfulness, and we only on Friday had a mindfulness workshop that's available to everybody, but it's a choice-based workshop. Like I said, we value months. I might, as a team leader, go out and do house visits with my colleagues just to give them that extra support. We have lunches in and out together, pre-COVID especially. We catch up outside and inside in nature. And we would also have our supervision sometimes outside in nature, obviously making sure it's a confidential space. But I know my colleague and my manager, Lisa, and I would have walked around Kilkenny Castle, a beautiful landmark in Ireland, and had confidential conversation around supervision. And it just being around nature after it, it's even more of a lift when you're around nature. No strings attached coffee. We celebrate people's birthdays and everybody's if somebody's going on maternity leave or weddings. And we also have a Green Party committee, and I have something on that shortly in my gallery. And we also have what's called a Work It group. And this group is a group free to all Focus Ireland team members, and the Housing First team definitely use this on a weekly, if not daily basis. It allows you to just do maybe a bit of desk yoga, some Pilates, and it has some wellbeing webinars where we learn some new ways of dealing with and coping with stress. Managing our calendar is key too. So we would have access to each other's calendars, and that can allow us to maybe see, okay, look, they have back-to-back meetings that day. There's no way I'm going to put a meeting in for that day as well. So just managing that would allow us to help cope with stress a bit better. And then physical exercise. This is key. We would really encourage everybody to kind of get up and do their physical exercise. And actually, one of the articles I read recently was somebody gets up in the morning, he's working from home full time, and he goes and does his cycle to work, 20-minute cycle to work. And although he's just doing his block, he feels when he's coming in, he's actually physically in work then. So we've also had a bit of crack over especially the last year. We've had some dance challenges, coffee mornings, step challenges. At the team meeting, sometimes we would do some quizzes. They could be completely non-relevant to anything social care. We've had quizzes on Friends and Netflix series and books and everything. Book clubs, we dress up for team meetings sometimes. We have our Christmas parties. I have been known to put on a virtual magic trick around Christmas show as well. And also as a group, on the Housing First team, we have a lotto syndicate. Now we haven't won anything yet, but we're still hoping. And then on Fridays, I have Friday funny videos. So I would send, or my team we send each other funny videos as a group. They're just really a way of kind of lifting for the weekend, getting that bit of a laugh in. And like we say, laughing is contagious and it is the best medicine. So we all want to have a good laugh. So the outcomes of putting all these kind of interventions of coping with stress from whether it's informal or formally, using the engagement teams as well. Thankfully, we have a low staff turnover in Housing First. We also have had limited sick days, which I'm so delighted to be telling everybody. We have service users that are extremely positive about the supports that they're availing of, and that their feedback is extremely positive. So recently we did a survey with our Housing First participants, and the positive feedback was second to none. I was so proud. So it filters down. It may be positivity coming from my manager to me, to my team, to the service users, and it does really filter down. We've also learned new ways of coping. So with the use of these webinars around journaling, I've learned that maybe every morning I might write 4 or 5 different goals that I'd like to have achieved by the end of the day, and realistic goals. We've established new hobbies. So we did a book club week last year. And since then, I love reading, but I never actually joined a book club before. And since then I've joined a book club in my spare time. So you do learn new skills, and you kind of learn new hobbies by doing some of these new activities as well. And we do, like I said, have happy team members. So Emma, please don't judge me, okay, what's coming next. So firstly, we've had some international cuisine events. So this was everybody put a country in a hat, and we had to pick out a country, and I got Japan. So I made this dish. So yeah, it went down very well with my husband, but not so much with my 2-year-old. Next, we had a colouring competition. I suppose this is for you, Emma. Yes, I did draw all of these. I can send you autographs in the post if you do require. But these were actually corrected by my colleague Michelle's little niece, who's 9, and she set us the target of drawing a magical castle, having a dragon kind of picture colouring competition, and then it was a scary monster competition. So yeah, just a bit of fun, and it was amazing because we got to actually recognise that we do actually have some artists on the team, not myself, as you can see. As I mentioned already, we're talking about our values, and something Focus Ireland send a lot of the time on our emails is just our kind of reminding everybody of our values. And around St. Patrick's Day, they sent us this value around kind of the integration piece, and also a lovely recipe for bread. So just to kind of get everybody, we might have been in the middle of a busy report, and it was just nice to read this and just kind of forget about what we were doing around that report for a little while, and came back to that then after. You may recognise this person here. This is Adrian Quinn. With Adrian's permission, if he's on this call, thank you, Adrian. Adrian has allowed me to just put this up. He's one of the Green Committee members, and he's an ambassador for climate change. And this is something we in Focus Ireland created, this Green Committee, to educate all the team members in becoming more green, becoming more client friendly, and looking at climate change as well. Sorry, climate friendly and climate change. And just again, you know, there's a book here, a recommendation, there's some Netflix series, and it might just again grow kind of somebody's interest in this area, so that they can park what's going on for them with Housing First and actually just take a bit of time out in their green, being more green. Like I mentioned, I'm still waiting to win the Euro Millions. You may not see me again if I do, but it's a bit of fun. And then I suppose this is how we would like to really be at the end of every day within Housing First. By putting all of these organisational structures in place, we'd like to see that we're in the moment, and we can do as best we can for our service users. So you got to nourish to flourish. So as a team leader, my job is to obviously make sure that my team are being nourished, supported in every way possible. And although these services and these formal and informal practices are available to them, it is a choice for them, but I'm delighted to say that's something they do choose to do. And yeah, I'm really thanking everybody here for inviting me to talk to you today about coping with stress while delivering Housing First. And as we say here in Ireland, go raibh míle maith agat. Thank you, 1,000 thank yous. And I'll take any questions.
Thanks a million, Laura. That was insightful, really, really good. Thank you very, very much. There's not too many questions coming in, so if people would like to add question in the chat function, they absolutely can. But we did have a comment from Greet, who said, do you need any extra workers from Belgium? Must be wonderful to work for Focus Ireland with all the supports that we have in place. So thank you very much for that comment. That's really, really nice. I do have a question for Emma, though, in relation to the first presentation. How, as I suppose, practitioners, can we support people who are currently grieving? Like, what can we do to help people? And I'm pretty sure there's not just one answer for this, that it's probably a bit more complicated. But if you could share your knowledge on this, that would be absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I think you're right. I wish there was, well, that's the whole thing about grief, is that every single person experiences it differently. So for someone, they might find one thing helpful versus someone else might find something different helpful. But I think the most common thing that I hear a lot about with grief is that after a loss, people get a lot of support right away, but a lot of times actually you're not quite like able to take that in. And sometimes, you know, after 6 months, someone's still grieving. And those are the times sometimes it's good to kind of check in with someone again. So when I was working in hospice, a lot of times people might not be able to kind of process their grief up to 2 years after a loss. So it's that constant kind of like, I still remember that this has happened. And if you want to talk about it, like, I'm here, how are you doing? That it's okay to bring it up again. It's not gonna upset the person. It's gonna make them real, like they're feeling that, you know, and that can last for a long time.
I think a lot of people would be not afraid, afraid is the wrong word, but would be very cautious not to upset somebody even more by delving into grief or trying to talk too much about it. But as you said at the start of your presentation, it's one of the facts of life. We all grieve for various things, I suppose, and that's what makes it so out there, but yet we're all very, very cautious to explore it. It's a very kind of specialized area. Is there any tips or any information you could give to current workers who are working with people in Housing First programs, working with customers who don't realize they're suffering from grief? They've lost so much that they just think it's part of their normal day-to-day life.
I think helping someone come to those terms and naming it and helping them understand what's going on for them. So yeah, I think a lot of times we don't realize that, oh, it's okay to grieve for not being hugged as a child. Like that's a loss, So saying to them, like, if they're telling you that story, like, that is a huge loss, and kind of validating it, that we think that it's not okay to be sad or grieve for, like I was saying, things in the past or things that maybe you don't typically think of as like a death. But it is a loss, and it's okay to be sad about that and giving that space. Yeah, I think I was always a bit, to be honest, I was always a bit scared to talk and go into grief and to talk about death. And that's part of the reason I went into working in hospice, because I was like, I want to learn how to talk about this. And the more I was in the environment where it was safe, we had to talk about it every day. And it was okay, and it was welcome to talk about it. And it was like such a warm, holding space that it made it less scary. So like you were saying, it's very scary to talk about it. And of course you have to have that relationship, and you want to do it in a way that is respectful. But once you have that relationship with someone and recognizing, like, if they're saying things to you, like, I just can't, I can't get myself out of bed to shower. I can't make myself breakfast. I can't do this and stuff like that. And then saying, you've had a big change in your life. And so it's normal to struggle with those day-to-day routines. That might be some way that you bring it up. Yeah, and kind of validate it. Because even when you get placed into a house, that's a change. And that can come with feelings of loss. Like, you kind of knew your routine before. And also when you get into that safe place, now you can kind of start grieving all of those past losses that you didn't have time for as well. So it might feel strange to a person that suddenly they feel safe, but now they're struggling. So kind of saying, like, that's normal, that's okay. And yeah, it might take you a little time. I think I was in a talk about Housing First last week, and they said it, they normally give someone about 2 months to kind of settle into the new space. And it's all of that change. Any change is very difficult. It brings up all those past losses.
Yeah. And generally it's when somebody does settle into a new space or new house and they've had a chance to embed themselves in the new way of living, that it brings up some of the old wounds that have been suppressed. And I suppose the take home from that particular piece is, don't avoid it, but we can help people by just talking out. I suppose what we're afraid of talking, which is about death and grief and bereavement. We have another question in: how do you convince your board or staff to invest in this? It seems impossible to do this in our work. I can only speak from a Focus Ireland perspective, and that's, we've had a change in culture and a change in how we go about our day-to-day work. We are embracing a trauma-informed environment as well as a psychologically informed environment. And we also use TCI, which is the Therapeutic Crisis Intervention, to help all of our customers. So we have been growing in this way for the last number of years, and really we've had good buy-in from our board and from our senior management and the executive team. A change like that in an organization isn't going to happen overnight, but it happens slowly and over a long period of time. I'm not sure if Laura or Emma would like to contribute to that.
I think it's a really good question. I think Niall has hit it on the head. It is, there has been a change of culture with our board, and that then it does have to come, like we can feed it up, and that has happened where I believe there has been a lot of people at these meetings, or a lot of our team members, project leaders, director services, that have been feeding, this request into the boards. And the more times we ask for something, we eventually have to get listened to, and as Niall said, it doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen slowly but surely. And I think especially with COVID in the last year, we've really seen that change. And I think it's because people have had the time to really look at, we need to mind our teams that are currently working from home all that bit more. And we obviously needed to mind them already, but these initiatives, these well-being strategies are there now in place that have actually, it's come from the likes of our team leaders, our project workers, our contact workers who've asked for this. And it's been not just shot down by the supervisors, it's been fed up, and then it's actually come back down now from the board. But it does take time, and it is a cultural shift as well. As Niall says, there's been some changes also internally with the teams. I think that has also helped.
Absolutely, yeah. And to be fair, our HR department has to take a lot of kudos in relation to this change, and how they've put various tools in place for all of the staff to avail of them. And it's if people want to avail of various techniques and I suppose sessions on mindfulness and how to de-stress, so they have to take a good level of responsibility, because they've been absolutely brilliant putting all these things in place for us. So I hope that goes some way to answer that question. We have another few coming in. So how can you help staff reprioritize their own self-care when they're very stressed and busy and feel like they have no time? This one I understand, because this is one where sometimes when you go to any kind of a mindfulness session, and it's like, I have a shed load of stuff to get done. Actually, what would help me now is to not go to this and to get my work done. So Emma or Laura, do you want to contribute to this particular question? How do we reprioritize?
I suppose we just have to lead by example. As a team leader, I need to say to my team, I can't come to that meeting today. I know it's very important, but also this mindfulness is very important, so that they're being shown that I'm prioritizing my own self-care, so that they can prioritize their own self-care. That's just one example of how I would do it. And not always do we see them doing it, but it's reminding them at their check-ins, their supervisions, and creating that space, and also being very aware of their calendar. So having that shared care calendar. So if we can see that there's back-to-back meetings, I know myself, I've done it. I was out working in a hotel with families that were homeless, and I would have had a meeting at 10, 11, 12, back-to-back. And it's just around actually changing that up a bit and managing that a little bit better. So I would just, my recommendation is to be leading by example as their team leader, not sending emails as much as possible late at night, because then they don't expect you to be doing, or them to be doing that as well. Turning off the mobile phone at 5 o'clock, so that no, we can't actually get a hold of you after 5. So it's just those little examples that we would try to lead by, so that they're hopefully doing the same thing. But I appreciate this caseload, and the pressures can be quite challenging.
Yeah, thank you very much, Laura. Another question is, could the reading material and the different models be circulated with the recording, please? That's not a problem, Samara, is it? I don't think it is. We can include all those.
Absolutely. We'll make sure that they're posted underneath the any links, or will be posted on our website with the recording of the webinar. So
great. And it generally takes a day or two for the recording to go up onto the website, though. So just so people know, it's not instant, unfortunately.
Yeah. I know we're going to wrap up in just a minute, but I was wondering, I have a question, if I may take advantage, but do you have any sort of evidence or sort of statistics almost in sort of, have you seen less burnout and less sort of staff turnover and like sort of hard numbers that people could then take back to their own organizations and argue like, look, if we put these things in place, we're more likely to be able to support our staff in a healthy way and so on? Because or is it even just worth the anecdotal argument that, by doing these things, we'll be able to better serve our customers, but also make sure that our staff are not burning out and are not overreaching themselves?
I suppose from Focus Ireland's point of view, we haven't done any research on the outcomes, and we're still fairly young into our journey of this new kind of way of working. One of the things I definitely will say is that where we came from was a very, very congested workplace market where we're struggling to get quality staff, and we looked at the current staff and said, well, why do we have turnover, and what can we do to keep good people that we employ in a position? And while our funding is limited and we can only pay what we can pay, and it's the market rate, it's about what are the other added pieces that we can bring to somebody feeling like they're contributing something, that they're earning a good living, and that they're being looked after and minded by the organization. I would imagine in the next year or two, we will have data on that, because we'll have a longer period of time to review it. But certainly the first indicating factors are really, really positive, that the supports put in place really help people to stay and like their job. And I suppose the early burnout question is one that we're trying to address as well. And it's okay to have a conversation like, if this job at this moment in time is too stressful, maybe you need to look at a different area within the organization that you can learn a new skill and not be as stressed. So it's possibly about how we go about doing a number of different things. I hope that answers your question without the hard data.
I think so. I think that can be useful for people who don't yet have that built into their organizations. And I think that, especially in these times of COVID, where a lot of those stress relieving mechanisms we would have in a positive office culture, a lot of people are isolated or working at home, or working sort of hours that have like extended into their free time, even though your commute is gone, your working hours might be longer now. So I think that those are really useful things to be able to take back to a board or managers and say, look, we know there's burnout in our organization. How do we make sure to mitigate that and support the people who we need to be healthy and safe and doing a good job? So
if we're not looking after the people who care, we won't be able to look after our clients or our customers, because if we're not good, we're going to pass it on. I think we're nearly ready to wrap up. So I've just one more question for Laura and Emma. If you could give us your main day-to-day tips and how to cope with stress. Just a couple of bite-sized takeaway pieces, if you don't mind.
I suppose for me, how do I cope with stress? So physical exercise would be my biggest go-to. And that could be potentially like, I'm going off now, I have an hour's drive to meet my team, and I'm going to park my car as far away from where I'm going to be meeting them. And that leaves me with walking to where I'm going to be meeting to them. So it might not necessarily be my evening routine. It's something my dad would have taught me, actually. He would have been working a lot of the time in the UK a few years ago, and I was always worried about his exercise because he was always eating on the run. And I used to say, Dad, what are you doing for your exercise? So he said, I'm parking in the furthest part in car park in Tesco's. I promise you, Laura. So I do that now as well. The other thing is, for this whole presentation, my notifications have been turned off. So I'm not getting my emails, and my phone is, both my personal and my work phones are on flight mode. And I've told my husband, if you come in here now, there'll be more. So just, I suppose, managing the notification side of things on a day-to-day basis. And for me, my third example would be, when I'm writing a list, I'm trying to write it in the best priority possible. So if I have an email, a phone call, and maybe a report to do, it's very easy to think, okay, I need to do that report. That's very important. I also need to ring that person. That's very important. I also need to write that email. And I used to be able to write the email and do the report nearly at the same time, and maybe even be on the phone. And it's just try not to do that. It's trying to just do the report. That space is for the report. And now in my calendar, I put lunch in my calendar. So my team see that I'm on lunch, and that's okay. If they ring me, they may get me, they may not get me. We are housing first all the same, but it's a good tip just to have lunch in your calendar as well. lunch is very important. We need to have good food to keep us moving, and that's something I would give some advice on. So that's me and how I cope.
Thanks a million, Laura. Emma, do you want to come in on that question?
I'm really similar. I do the same thing, Laura, with like, I schedule out my walking time, my yoga time, things like that. And just kind of making sure that my team knows that they can do that as well. And that I value that for them. So yeah. And I think, and just talking, like giving that space to talk. So you were saying any evidence-based, I could send you a report on some actual numbers about how our supervision, group supervision, does increase well-being and decrease burnout in staff at high-risk jobs, which is like ours. And so, yeah, it does help. Yeah.
If you could send on, if you have figures, you could send them on. We can include them in the recording and the extra materials. That'll be absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much, Emma. I think we're going to finish up now because there's no other questions and we're just 10 past 11. So I want to conclude this session and say thanks everybody for listening. A special thank you to Emma from Rock Trust and Laura from Focus Ireland. It was great to have both of you here. We will be having more webinars in the second half of the year, and they're in the planning stages at the moment. So we will be in touch about those upcoming. Also, thanks Samara for the co-hosting and making sure all the IT stuff was sorted at the start. So really appreciate it. And Claire in the background, whom you can't see, but Claire is there. So thank you, Claire. Will I hand over to you, Samara?
Well, I think you've done a fantastic job wrapping up now. That's great. Do keep an eye on our website for the recording as well as the reading material. And we have a new feature on the website that kind of lists a calendar of events. So feel free to sign up for other events. Also, this is a community of practice. So really don't hesitate to get in touch with ideas of webinar topics that you'd like us to talk about, or other ideas. Like a lot of the things we've done this year, that's maybe the only bright spot in all of these Zoom meetings, is that it gives us an opportunity to come together more informally and more often, and to talk about things that we might not otherwise, set aside a whole day for. But to take an hour or so to together it's really been valuable, and we really would appreciate your input. So anyways, have a very good afternoon or rest of the morning depending on where you are, and thanks again, and we hope to see you soon. Goodbye.
Thank you.